Joseph Henrich calls humans puzzling primates. Despite the fact that we're weak and not particularly bright, he says we've been a strangely successful species, and what's behind our success might surprise you. Culture as the driving force of evolution. His new book, The Secret of Our Success, lays out this intriguing argument, and Joseph Henrich joins us now on the line from Harvard University in Cambridge, Massachusetts, where he's professor of human evolutionary biology. He's also a Canada Research Chair at the University of British Columbia. And Joseph, it's nice to have you on our airwaves on TVO tonight. I do want to start with your pointing out something that may take our viewers a little bit aback, and that is that despite our large brains, we're actually innately not very smart. So tell us, how do we stack up against other primates? Let's start there.
Well, I think the best way to get into this, Steve, is to imagine a kind of thought experiment where we take a bunch of people, say from Toronto, and we parachute them into the Ituri forest in Africa. And at the same time, we parachute in, say, a group of capuchin monkeys from Costa Rica. So they're both parachuting into a new environment. And then we play a game to see which group of primates can survive the longest. This troop of capuchin monkeys or the humans. Now you might think that the humans should be able to clean up the floor with the monkeys because they have these big brains. But a little bit of thinking, you might realize that humans don't innately know how to find food. We can't innately build shelters. We're not very good at making tools. Without this large body of cultural knowledge that we actually rely on to survive, even as hunter-gatherers. So in a game of survivor against these capuchin monkeys, the monkeys are likely to beat us. So this tells us there's something more that our big brains might not be for individually figuring out problems. But what I argue is that it's for acquiring information from other people. So this is cultural information.
Well, of course, everybody in the rest of Canada would not find this surprising since they despise Torontonians and Toronto and would assume that we'd be beat regardless of where we were and what we did. Having said that, let's talk about culture and what you mean by culture when you say that's the magic element here. What do you mean by culture?
Yeah, so by culture I mean that information, the ideas, beliefs, values, and practices that we learn from other people and that gets transmitted across generations. So things like how to make fire, how to make tools, or what plants we can use for medicine. A large body of knowledge about tracking. All the kinds of things that anthropologists have showed that hunter-gatherers rely on when they're trying to survive in environments all over the world. One example that might be fun for Canadians is the Franklin expedition. So Franklin and his men get deposited up in northern Canada and they can't survive. But it so happens a group of Inuit called the Nescalit had been surviving there for centuries and survived with no problem as hunter-gatherers. That's because the Nescalit had a large body of cultural information that had been accumulated over generations that allowed them to capture seals and make snow houses and all the other things that go along with surviving in the Arctic.
In which case, tell us what you think the role that culture has played in our evolution as a species.
Yeah, so the key thing to understanding human evolution in humans is that once you begin this process of learning from others, and it gets sufficiently good, sufficiently high fidelity, that one generation can build on the insights and tricks and techniques of the prior generation, the cultural information begins to accumulate. And what this turns out to be is a kind of second system of inheritance, a system of inheritance that runs in parallel with genetic evolution and actually shapes the genetic evolution. So one of the examples that I like to start with is cooking and fire. And anthropologists like my colleague Richard Wrangham here at Harvard have analyzed the human digestive tract and shown that actually our stomachs are too small, our teeth are too small, and our colons are too short for a primate of size that eats the kind of foods we eat. But it all makes sense if you realize that we're a cooking species. We're a species who can make fire and cook food. But the thing about cooking and fire is we're not innately able to make fire. If the average person goes out into the forest and tries to make fire, they're unlikely to be successful unless they had some cultural transmission. So this is a case where something we learn how to do, cooking and fire, has shaped our anatomy and our physiology. And one of the things I argue in the book is that logic then extends to all kinds of other aspects of our bodies, including our psychology. So it shaped our brains, our social psychology.
Conversely, let's do a different example here. How about our distance running ability and the evidence of the role that culture plays in our genetic evolution?
Yeah, so Another colleague of mine, Dan Lieberman, has analyzed human anatomy, and he's made, I think, a very good case that humans have a large number of running adaptations. So just to give you 3 examples, we have springy arches that other primates don't have. So when we run, at least when we run in barefoot, we land on the front of our foot, and that stores energy, which we then can use to spring up. We also have a nuchal ligament in the back of our neck that allows our torso to twist independent of the rest of our body, and we don't see that in other primates, but we do see it in other species. And finally, we have a powerful sweating system that allows us to cool our bodies when we're running fast enough, and we especially have a lot of acrine sweat glands in our heads that get hot, and we need to cool off our heads in order to continue to run long distances. Now, if you would look at the body like an engineer, you would say that the sweating system is missing something important. There's no water tank. So if you begin to run, you can start sweating, but you're going to quickly run out of water if you're trying to do persistence hunting, which hunter-gatherers do, and try to chase down some big prey. But humans use cultural knowledge, so they know about where to find water, what kinds of tubers or roots or plants contain water, and they also make water containers. So Australian Aborigines have techniques for turning animals inside out to use them as water containers. In the Kalahari, hunter-gatherers use ostrich eggs to carry water. Some groups use long tubes of bamboo to carry water. And these are all ways, these create a kind of gene culture coevolutionary package that allows our whole running system to work and allow us to hunt more effectively. But it only works if you add the cultural elements to it.
Let's do another term that you use in the book, and you can help us understand what you mean when you talk about collective brains. What's that a reference to?
Right, so the key idea here is that humans can learn from other people, but that means that humans kind of think as groups. The larger a group and the more interconnected we are, meaning the more we're able to learn from each other, the larger our collective brain, and the faster this cumulative cultural evolutionary process will produce large bodies of adaptive knowledge, fancy tools, and know-how. So we've actually done, myself and others have done research looking at how the size and interconnectedness of a society predicts its innovativeness, how fancy its tools and technology are, and how quickly they're going to evolve. So when we're trying to understand how and why it is humans are able to do all the things they do, we have to think of us as a kind of social organism where the information is transmitting amongst individuals, and it's in the synergies between minds that we're able to generate all these fancy tools and technologies.
Tell us why you think cultural knowledge does not become innate in a species.
Yeah, so the key idea to understand there is that it's constantly changing, and so the changes too quickly for our genetic evolution to be able to adapt to it. So what's happened is we become better learners. We become better able to acquire all this information. The other thing is that as humans expanded out of Africa, we expanded into a diverse number of environments. So all across these diverse environments required you to know about different kinds of plants and animals, how to make shelters with different materials, how to make boats with different materials. Different forms of social organization were required. However, in some cases, we did get pieces of it that became innate. So for example, we're particularly good at learning knowledge about plants and animals. And so if you learn something about one particular animal, like a certain cat hunts at night, you readily generalize that to all cats. So say you see a lion hunting at night, you might assume all lions hunt at night. That's kind of an inference you make from one observation, and it's something we do automatically and unconsciously, and we don't learn to do that. So we have a whole system for extending the kind of cultural information we acquire and accumulate across generations.
It's one of those kind of odd subjects, because I know one of my kids asked me once, when we're up in cottage country here in the province of Ontario, why don't the deer run off the road when they hear cars coming? Why do they get hit so often or frankly shot by hunters? Surely they would have accumulated knowledge over dozens of centuries not to put themselves in that kind of danger. But I guess it doesn't work that way, does it?
Right. So the thing with deer is they don't have a cumulative cultural evolutionary system. So if those were human groups, they would quickly learn and then pass down information about avoiding roads. But the deers are suffering from some innate mechanisms which cause them to freeze in headlights rather than run out of the way. And so there's a long process of natural selection acting on genes that will eventually remove that behavior. But unfortunately, cars have not been around long enough for that to be the case.
Gotcha. On the issue of our ability to learn from others, let's do an excerpt from the book here. You write, Aiming to reduce deadly diarrhea, malaria, or sexually transmitted infections, public health specialists have long emphasized the need for education. Many in public health are or were committed to the idea that if people just have the facts, they will behave in sensible ways, meaning they will use toilets, wash their hands, sleep under bed nets, and use condoms. Apparently, though, Joseph, it's not enough to just simply give people the facts. How come?
Yeah, well, the key to understanding that is to realize that we're really cultural learners and that we're using a lot of different cues to figure out who in our social milieu, which individuals and what kinds of information we should pay attention to. So in the book I lay out a variety of different ideas and evidence for those ideas that humans use cues of success and prestige and status, and we match on ethnicity and dialect and gender in order to zero in on those we think are most likely. This is all happening unconsciously, of course. Most likely to have adaptive practices or useful behaviors and useful ideas. So when external organizations come in and simply try to educate people, none of the cultural learning machinery is on that says key in, pay attention to this, acquire it, and internalize it, make it part of your behavioral repertoire. So we know part of this from practical cases where development organizations have tried to convince locally high status or prestigious individuals to adopt a practice. And then you're more likely to get it to transmit and spread, because it's about imitating or acquiring the practice. And sometimes the belief and understanding actually comes after the practice is acquired. And it's less about teaching people facts. And so one of the reasons that public health programs have been so unsuccessful at transmitting these behaviors is it's assumed a kind of rationalist model, where if we just convey the facts and we assume you're going to believe the facts, then you'll change your behavior in response to this new information. But that's just not how human psychology works.
Gotcha. A bit of a two-part question here for this next area of exploration. Is it a given that we as humans prefer to learn and interact from people who look like us, sound like us, speak the same dialect or language as us? Is that a given?
Well, so let me give you the idea. So with this idea that genes and culture interact, culture goes first, and it creates a world in which you have different groups that speak different dialects and maybe dress different, but they also have different hidden underlying norms. These might be norms about what the different responsibilities are for husbands and wives. This might be norms about how to treat your children or how you're supposed to behave in a business transaction. Now genes go, and they're adapting to this world in which there are these different groups with different social norms. And the idea is that we have evolved genetically a psychology that says we should preferentially learn from those who have things like the same dialect and the same dress, because that gives us the right social norms for success in the environment we're likely to be in the future. And we should also preferentially interact with those who tend to share these marker traits, these ways of dressing and dialect. And that means we're most likely to interact with those who share our norms, so we can coordinate on things, on different roles and responsibilities, or different ways of raising children, or what the right things to do are in a business transaction. So then the evidence is it does seem that from a very young age, children use, for example, dialect cues. So they preferentially learn from those who speak the same language as mom, and they preferentially attend to those too. So there's at least some preliminary evidence from a number of different societies that show that this does seem to be a basic aspect of our psychology.
Okay, that's a fascinating conclusion, particularly for those of us who live in urban Canada, because of course we deal with cultural diversity pretty much every minute of the day in urban Canada. And I guess if I hear you right, you're telling us that's counter-evolutionary. Is that right?
Well, I don't think the term counter-evolutionary is right, but it does underline the fact that there's a real challenge to developing institutions, functional institutions in a multicultural society. And what it does say is it places some value on the importance of establishing shared markers amongst members of a society. So for example, having a shared language spoken with a similar dialect is going to cause people to, it's going to turn off these mechanisms, or at least it's going to reduce the strength, the degree to which people distinguish other groups and see them as differently and preferentially interact with members of their own group.
Okay, I'm going to get another definition out of you here. We talked about culture, we talked about collective brains. Let's do a third one. Prestige cues. What do you mean when you talk about those?
Yeah, so underneath prestige and prestige cues is the idea that humans have two forms of status. We have one form of status called dominance, and this is that we get from non-human primates, from chimpanzees, from baboons. And in dominance hierarchies, certain members of the group control force or force threat. They can basically compel others through aggression to defer to them, to give them ground, to allow them to have mates and resources and things like that. But in humans, because we can learn from each other members of our social groups are also given status because they're sources of information. They might have valuable know-how. And so we have evolved to key in on those individuals most likely to possess this valuable information. And this gives rise to prestige, and particularly to prestige cues. So prestige cues are when you're trying to figure out who to learn from. And you know, some people are more successful, some are more skilled, some match you on these self-similarity cues like gender and ethnicity. But there's also cues that come from who other people pay attention to. So if you come into a room and you see everyone deferring to and listening to one member of that group, that's a prestige cue. And that hints at you, at least unconsciously, that that's someone you might want to pay attention to and consider learning from. And you might weigh their opinion a bit more heavily when it comes to deciding what your opinion is on a topic. So there's lots of psychological research on this.
How high up the list of prestige cues would we find a Harvard evolutionary biologist?
Oh, I'm not sure. Yeah, so I'll have to find out. I've just arrived.
Okay, good enough. Let's, because in this day and age it's all about the internet, let's find out about the influence on the web of some of what you're talking about here. Is the redefinition of community that has come about because of the influence of the internet, is it having an impact, or do you think is it likely to have an impact on our cultural evolution?
Yeah, the internet should be a powerful force. So if you look at human history, some of the most powerful forces in speeding up certain kinds of evolutionary processes, especially about technology, have to do with communication systems. So the central to the collective brain idea is that individuals are sharing information, and the more they can share and recombine different insights from different people, and over history when you can read, the faster you should develop new ideas, new products, new ways of doing things. And so with the internet, that really speeds things up. And as long as there remain different communities, language communities, social communities on the internet, you won't have a concern about over-homogenization. So different communities are doing things in different ways, and that provides lots of variation for this evolutionary process that drives innovation and technological change.
Okay, let's move on and talk about the difference of the genders here. And once again, I want to quote from your book where you write, "Our fast genetic evolution, big adult brains, slow bodily development, and gradual wiring up are made possible only as part of a larger package of features that include the sexual division of labor." And let's get into this. What evolutionary impact do you think that breaking down the sexual division of labor is likely having?
Well, I think the key idea here is that if the sexual division of labor is at all old, and lots of paleoanthropologists think that it is, that somewhere relatively early in human evolution, males started to specialize in some aspects of life and females in other life. So a pair bond between a male and a female is a kind of collaboration for the purposes of child rearing. We developed the sex bias in our social learning. So males tend to copy males and females tend to copy females. Now, of course, there's lots of cross-copying, and it's not that, it's exclusive. But it means that as we have less segregated institutions, less segregated organizations, we're going to begin to mute the differences between males and females. As males get more and more opportunities to copy, say, successful and prestigious women, and vice versa, it should mute the differences between males and females. Now, other societies have provided a kind of natural experiment for us by creating institutions, think about schools, in which we put all the males together and all the females together. And that tends to exaggerate certain characteristics of males and females and separates them psychologically and behaviorally.
Okay, you talk gender, let's also talk race. And once again, I'm going to quote from your book where you say race is not a biological concept. Here's the quote: "Racial and ethnic categories arise when cultural evolution taps our human universal tribal psychology to carve up the social world in particular ways. Though these categories are not usually rooted in any important genetic variation, these categories are learned unconsciously and can affect our perceptions, automatic intuitions, and rapid judgments. Why, in your view, has evolution favored our learning to separate humanity into races and to to discriminate among those races.
Right, so the crucial distinction you have to understand that quote is that you need to separate race and ethnicity. And oftentimes, at least in common speech, people use those interchangeably. So the case I make in the book is that we have an ethnic psychology, which I described this before, where cultural evolution tends to divide the world into groups that have different social norms, and they're characterized by different languages, or they speak different dialects, they dress in different ways, and these are different ethnic groups. Now, for most of human evolutionary history, we never would have met someone who was very genetically different from us. So people didn't look different as a consequence of genes. But of course, when people get sailing ships, they go to different places, and they begin to encounter people who have different genetically transmitted differences, say differences in skin color. And the idea is that differences that are genetic, say in terms of skin color or hair form, this can feed into and tap our ethnic psychology, which originally evolved for partitioning cultural groups that have different norms and speak different languages. But it can also take as input different people who have different skin colors or hair forms, these other genetically transmitted phenotypes. So race is about these different genetically transmitted cues, whereas ethnicity is about different culturally transmitted cues. So it's not that we have a psychology for race. In fact, to the contrary, we have a psychology for ethnicity that gets deployed in a way that evolution didn't intend to think about races. But it also gives you a prescription for undoing some of that, in that if you can give people of very different races the same ethnic cues, in other words, speaking the same language, dressing the same clues, then you can overpower and mute the racial cues. And there's already research showing that that's in fact true, that the ethnic cues are more powerful to our psychology than the genetically transmitted racial cues.
Okay, Joseph, in our last few minutes here, let's touch on a couple of more things. First, your students, because you do tell us that your students sometimes ask you whether evolution has stopped or even reversed. And I'm curious as to why they would ask you that question.
Well, I think there's an intuition when people are first learning about evolution by natural selection that natural selection tends to make us better. And so if you see it doing something, so now we have medical procedures that can fix our knees if we have a problem, or if a couple is infertile, they can go and get treatment. And this gives people who would have otherwise potentially been selected out by natural selection and didn't get to reproduce, they get to transmit their genes to the next generation. And so people have the intuition that that means we're not going to be getting better along those dimensions. And what I'd like to do is just point out that this is just culture redirecting our evolution once again. And that in fact this redirecting of evolution by natural selection on our genes has been going on for a very long time. So I like to point to a kind of precocious Homo erectus 1 million years ago, so a human ancestor. And 1 million years ago, the spread of fire and cooking and food processing was actually causing our teeth to get smaller so that we could no longer process the foods that were required to live. And we had to rely on fire and cooking and other technologies to survive. But a precocious Homo erectus might have said, well, evolution has stopped. You know, we're not as good as we used to be. Our teeth aren't as big. They're not as strong. But what's happening is that we're going down another evolutionary pathway, and we're becoming increasingly dependent on this large body of cumulative know-how. So what's happening in the modern world with modern medicine is interesting and certainly seems faster than what's happened in the past, but it's really the continuation of a long process that's been occurring for at least 1 million years.
And one last question with one short quote here. You write that culture-gene coevolution can be remarkably fast, but can evolution hope to keep up with the current pace of human cultural change?
Yeah, it probably can, because culture has long been faster than genetic evolution. It sort of gets dragged along by cultural evolution in its wake. And more there'll be problems that culture will create that it will also solve. So things like epidemics and plagues, which were the products of cultural evolution, say, as people began to live in cities, they began to have lots of transmission of parasites and pathogens, which then affected our genetic evolution, and we gradually evolved genetic immunities to these things. Now, increasingly, although there's still a long way to go, we solve those problems with cultural evolution, with the new vaccines, new medical approaches, new public health approaches that allow us to nip those in the bud before genetic evolution gets a chance to play its card.
absolutely fascinating. The name of the book is The Secret of Our Success: How Culture is Driving Evolution, Domesticating Our Species, and Making Us Smarter. And I think we're all a lot smarter, having just spent the last 25 minutes with you, Joseph Henrich. Thanks so much for joining us on the line from Cambridge, Massachusetts.
Thanks. Good to be with you.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit supporttvo.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.